Welcome to Hey, great shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Cracked Racquets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. I see our screens are slightly off. We're going to get super producer Daniel Westoff on that here in a moment. But of course, welcome in everyone. On today's show, we've got another edition of The Deciding Point for all of you college tennis fans. Our weekly breakdown of everything that happens in the Division I college tennis world. Of course, here on Tuesday nights, we break down everything in the Division I women's college tennis world. And on today's show, we've got so many different results to discuss. We're about a month away from knowing who will be competing in the 2023 NCAA tournament. As such, every match that much more important in our thoughts on this season moving forward. Of course, we are now in the thick of conference play across the country as well. As such, we have significant results, closely fought results, dramatic results, just all sorts of results to discuss on today's show. And joining me as he does each and every week to break it all down is a man you know best as the returning champion of returning champions here on our Cracked Racquets podcast, the founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog and podcast, and a man who we had to get his shot just right before we introduced, looking wonderful as always. It's our dear friend, John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I had a little PTSD from the way our images were being shown for a second because it was like all black in certain spots. And I was like, I cannot lose power again. This is the first Tuesday night I have had power in 4 weeks. So I'm very happy to be here, happy to have power, and things are great.
No, that's the tennis gods blessing you, Jay, for continuing to show up each and every week to do this show. I know we're immensely grateful for that fact, but has it set in for you yet? I was having this thought throughout the course of the weekend, and we're fortunate enough to get to call so much of the action. We appreciate all of you who have tuned in to our Cracked Racquets broadcasts on ESPN Plus, SEC, ACC Network Plus. We have a lot of fun with them every Friday and Sunday. Of course, shout out to Perry Shinen, who hosts one of those shows on Friday, as well as our Big Ten coverage each and every Sunday. Has it dawned upon you yet, Jay, that we're about 7 weeks, 8 weeks out from this season being over? I mean, it's time for the home stretch.
It has dawned on me for two reasons. The first is when I start looking at weeks ahead and matches on the schedule, there are some teams with only 4 or 5 matches left on their schedule. And then the real kicker is that I have put in my PTO. So I know that this NCAA's is coming, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's very well said. It is when you're scrolling through a team's schedule, you're looking at their record, you look what you have left, and you're scrolling all the way down, and you can see the conference tournament tab, and
Yep,
you're like,
there you
oh,
go.
okay, that's April 17th through the 19th, or whatever that weekend may be. Yes, it is striking to have reached that point of the year. And again, that's why we have so many results to break down today, because everything's significant, whether it be in the race for the top 8, the race for the top 16, the race just to get into the NCAA tournament. Some teams fighting the 500 rule as well. Everything matters down the home stretch. All the leeway, all the space you had to build, that's done with. And so from here on in, again, we are looking at everything with an eye towards that NCAA tournament in May. We've got plenty of results to break down, whether it be what's happening in the SEC, whether it be, of course, the big result in Texas, the Longhorns earning their first signature victory over Iowa State. Virginia takes that always treacherous Florida swing in ACC play. Plenty of action out west as well. We'll get into that. We'll get into our rankings. I want to ask Jay, though, if he and I have undersold one of the biggest stories of the season as well. We've got that for you later in the show. We'll get into the week ahead as well. So much in what promises to be a very fun episode of The Deciding Point. Of course, the reason we're able to do these shows week in, week out is because of the support we get from all of you college tennis fans. We're so grateful. So many of you choose to join us here every Tuesday night. Of course, we on Wednesday nights break down all the Division I men's action as well. Shout out to all of you fans players, coaches who make this such a fun experience for us here at Cracked Racquets. Of course, a massive shout out as well to our dear friends at Ellesse, proud sponsors of each and every week's episodes of The Deciding Point. Now, I'm not repping Ellesse gear tonight, but I usually am. Again, whether it be the hoodie, whether it be the polo shirt, whether it be just about anything in their catalog, I promise you're going to look good, you're going to feel good, you're going to play good when rocking Ellesse gear. A shout out to our dear friends at Ellesse for their continued support of The Deciding Point. To learn more about everything they offer, just click on the link in the description to this episode. With all of that said, Jay, let's get into what was, again, a jam-packed week in the Division I college tennis world. And I think the place we have to start is with that battle in Texas. Of course, the University of Texas, they're the two-time defending champions. And, two very different national championship stories, right? It was very clear to us in 2021 that team was going to be good from the moment they were put together. We were fortunate enough to be at the national indoors. They had North Carolina on the brink, up 3-1. Carolina ultimately able to overcome, 6-4, 4-1 deficit. I think Scotty trailed Shivathapan at that number 4 spot. She flips it. They win the match 4-3. But you knew from then onward, and that's February, that Texas team was going to be in the national championship hunt. Last year was a little bit different. They had a lot of those pieces back. They had to work in some new pieces, right? Uvrutsky, Zainalova, and Zemaripa, all these different pieces that weren't quite ready at the national indoors in February, but the moment the NCAA tournament started and throughout Big 12 play, you saw those freshmen begin to click. You saw this team mold into what it became come May by, the start of April, mid-April, certainly by the start of that NCAA tournament. We hadn't seen this Texas team go on that sort of run quite yet. Now, of course, Texas was fine at the national indoors. They went 2-1. They got a big win over Oklahoma. They were knocked out by Iowa State in the quarterfinals, but still 2-1 for a group that's working in the Nicoles, Kieran, Rivkin. You're working in Ataya Pachkaleva, obviously. Again, all these different pieces onto their roster. They go 2-1 at that event. Drop a match to Stanford at home, win a couple of conference matches, drop one to Oklahoma State, a tight 4-3 contest. Obviously, still looking for that signature victory. Yes, they beat Oklahoma again, but they finally get it at home via victory over Iowa State. Now, this was a really good match, Jay. Ultimately, it ends up with a lopsided scoreline, 4-1 for the 4-1 and 6-1 for the Longhorns, but look, Texas rolled in doubles. That's something they hadn't done a lot of in their big matches this year. More importantly, they separate themselves at the bottom of the lineup to get 3 3-set victories. I know they were after the clinch, but 3 3-set victories at the 4 through 6 spots to see Zainalova, who was so good during Texas's run last season, get a win over an Obi Kucherter who has been downright unbeatable at the 2 spot for Iowa State. Texas finally got its signature victory, Jay.
Yeah, this was a great win for Texas, getting that revenge from indoors. It's funny you mentioned the bottom of the lineup. I knew that this was going to be a different match for Texas when they came out so strong in doubles, right? Iowa State has been extremely strong in doubles. They, took the doubles point easily at indoors. So for Texas to take the doubles point, 6-3 at 2, 6-2 at 3, that kind of set the tone. And I actually think where they set themselves apart was at 2 and 3, where they flipped their lineup. They had Zainalova at 2, Shivathapan at 3. I think a really good matchup choice for them against Kajuru and Kadlichkeva. And ultimately, getting the straight set wins there at 2 and 3 took significant pressure off this Texas team to go up 3-0. I don't think they separated themselves at the bottom of the lineup at 4 through 6. I think, interestingly, coming into the season, you thought 4 through 6 was going to be where Texas was going to be extremely unbeatable, and maybe we only go toe-to-toe with the North Carolina at 4 through 6, but otherwise it's going to be tough for teams to catch up. That hasn't been the case this season. That wasn't the case against Oklahoma State, where they got swept at 4 through 6. And yes, they came out and got wins at 4, 5, and 6, but it was all 3 sets. The players I'm most impressed with coming away from this match was Zainalova and Shivathapan, who looked to be stepping into their NCAA winning form.
Well, as always, you're right. And I want to start with the doubles side of that equation because you look at the numbers for Texas, who are 14-3 overall. And again, who were the losses to? Stanford, not a bad loss. That was what, 5-2? Pretty tightly contested matches. Obviously, the loss at the indoors, Iowa State kind of blitzed them.
Yep.
4-3 Oklahoma State is what it is. This team is 28-11 in individual double sets. That sounds pretty good. No team has more than 10 wins, right? No team has more than 8 wins. It's been pretty patchwork. Like
Hmm.
sometimes it's you, sometimes it's there. And they've only played 7 different combinations, which, given all of the options they have, whether it be the players who played in singles against Iowa State, you have a Marley Zane, who of course is there on the bench and has had plenty of success singles and doubles in her career. You're right. It was the rhythm they had in doubles from the start against Iowa State that was so impressive. Now, in terms of the depth, big picture, I agree with you. You thought that would be even stronger. But where I would flip it on you is I thought Texas looked really good, but I also think this just tells you that Iowa State is real. Like, this just tells you that Iowa State goes on the road to Austin. Yes, they lose 3 matches, 4 through 6, but to your point, all of them 3-set matches. You see a really good win from Naklo at that number 1 spot as well. And, again, I think if you're Iowa State, you see Kavlikova, who's lost what, like 3 matches so far this year and has slowly worked her
Yeah, I
way
think
up to that.
less.
Yeah, and
I
has
think she was
slowly
undefeated until about a week ago.
and works her way up now to that number 3 spot in the lineup. Obi again has been rocks at that number 2 spot. She gets beat on the day. Okay, sometimes that'll happen. I thought the flip side of this is that Iowa State is real. And if, again, coming off of the national indoors, they hadn't lost since. Now, they hadn't played the most rigorous schedule, I would say, since the national indoors. This was their first, or I wouldn't say their first, but their most serious test because Kansas was fine. Again, that road trip wasn't easy. They fought tough. Like, what this really tells me is Iowa State, I don't know if they're firmly in the tier 1 conversation. I don't know if anyone is but North Carolina anymore, but they're right in the mix with everyone else. And they absolutely can feel like, yeah, we can make Orlando. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, I didn't have any doubts about them. I think that they've looked really strong since indoors. They didn't have a post indoors dip, but you're right. Kind of the heavy part of their Big 12 season is now, right?
Yeah.
They play Texas. Now they're going to go and play both Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. So that's where they're going to be really tested here and kind of get the bulk of that high end competition, but they've looked strong since indoors. I have no doubt that this is a top team. Again, the only thing I was a little concerned about was doubles because I do think that for this team to be successful, it requires taking doubles. And then I think they can get any other point on the board, but it's going to be tough to take 4. So for them, they need to find out kind of what happened there in doubles. How can they take a doubles point on the road against a team that's in form?
Well, I think it's good that they got blitzed early because you mentioned it. These next 2 are on the road, right? They're at Oklahoma State. They're at Oklahoma. And here's the other thing to watch. Texas 9 in the latest ITA rankings. Iowa State's 10.
Yep.
Oklahoma State's 17. Oklahoma's in trouble, and we'll get to them a little bit later. I don't know if the Big 12 is going to get a top 8 seed. It's going to be really close. Iowa State probably can if they run the table, but that's almost what they have to do, right? They probably have to go 2-0 here this weekend, Jay.
Well, there's room for one. We said this
Yeah,
last week. There's
sure.
room for one. Whoever wins, either wins out or wins the conference and wins the title, I do think will get into a top 8 seed.
But here's what I'm saying. If Oklahoma State and Oklahoma go and beat Iowa State this weekend at home, which is very much in the realm of plausible scenarios,
Yeah.
where are the points? Like, where are they going
Yeah.
to play catch up?
Yeah. Well, that in that situation, that hurts Texas,
Yeah,
right? Because now Texas is one of their best wins is devalued,
yeah.
and it's going to be tough. But I do think one
Well,
of these teams, I think, is going to get in.
can I give you the counter? I don't know if they do because if Ohio State beats Michigan and they have points to share between the two of them with what Ohio State did in the non-conference play, and both Ohio State and Michigan have a win over Oklahoma State, have wins over Oklahoma. Like, I don't know if there's enough. I was looking at the Texas resume, and I mean this in both positive and negative connotation. Here's a 27 or 2018 Alex comment. Everyone's got to win over UCF. Because I was like looking through top 4 wins and like what are every team's 4 best right now. And I love Coach Kanyeko for scheduling the way he's scheduled. You got to give a shout out. Anytime a team's coming to Florida, he's like, hey, come play us too.
Well, they all want to go this year because of NCAA's is there.
Very true. Again, it's good scheduling. That's what I said. It's glass half full, but just about all of these top teams have just about beaten UCF is what I'm trying to say.
I think the ACC is like 5-0 against UCF this season.
And so the issue is like, look, again, I think Texas's best wins because they didn't get the Stanford win. And I'm blanking on who they beat in the first round of the National Indoors, but like 2 wins over Oklahoma is not as good as what Virginia already has a win over a Duke. They're going to someone's getting a win over Miami. Miami's already got a win over NC State, all these different things. I just don't know if there's enough.
Yeah, I mean, the one wild card here is that Texas still has NC State on their schedule.
Yeah.
Right. And so that they are best positioned to make the top 8. Yeah, it probably requires a win there with NC State.
So now I can go round the bend. That's exactly the argument where I wanted to end this Texas discussion is by winning this match, they're in the driver's seat. Like because now again, yes, they lost the Oklahoma State match, but you still have Big 12 ahead. You got your wins over Iowa State, over Oklahoma. They have a non-conference match with NC State, which is the lowest hanging fruit for points on the schedule for any of these Big 12 teams. If they run the table, they're the one with the pathway to knock out an ACC school or maybe even knock out, a Michigan or an Ohio State. And so, yeah, that's why this was such a big win is now this team's 14-3. They've got some confidence. You mentioned it. Zainalova playing really well. Yes, I know she lost her match at the number 1 spot, but Nicole Kieran's been the real deal. She's 7-3 overall on the season. So really strong start. And for her, I think Rivkin's getting better as well. Texas is rounding into form. And yeah, it's crazy because they have so many veterans, and yet it's very clear we have yet to see the best from Texas. But let's move on from there. Let's talk about the conference Texas plans on joining in the very near future. That, of course, is the SEC. And I think the big thing coming off of this weekend in the SEC, and we're so fortunate to broadcast some of this action, you finally have some separation from some of these schools, particularly at the top. And let's start with another match here in the SEC that was far closer than the scoreline indicates. Georgia 4-1 win over Tennessee. Now, look, Georgia, I mean, for them to scrap their way out of the doubles point, Kutzer and I'm blanking who she played. Kutzer and Tomase were serving for the set for the doubles point at the number 3 spot. They were up 5-4. They had all of this momentum. Credit to Kowalski and Riasco who grind their way out of that scenario. They rip off 3 straight games. Georgia escapes with the doubles point there. But I'll tell you what, there were a lot of really good first sets in this match. And what the big takeaway I think from this is you look for Georgia. What's the difference between them and Tennessee? And we've alluded to this all year. Tennessee's extraordinarily deep. They don't have the big guns. And you saw Leah Ma with the 2-2 win at 1. Vidmanova put on a clinic. 0-1 over Tomase. Like we were going through our introductions and we were like, we actually have to stay here with Vidmanova because she's about to win. And like, again, this is what makes this Georgia team so good is not only do they have depth, but they've got some big guns at the top of their lineup with how well Leah Ma has played this year. Dasha Vidmanova in the conversation as well for the best. They have 2 players in the conversation for best player in the country. I mean, again, what this tells me is Tennessee is good, but they don't have those tier 1 big guns that Georgia has.
Yeah, I think you were trying to make this a little bit closer than it really was, but this was a statement win from Georgia, right? I mean, they drop only a handful of games at 1 and 2. They sweep the top 3 in straight sets. They take 4.
But I don't know. So sorry to interrupt. It's just, yes, they won 3 in straight sets, but did you actually watch that Kowalski-Kutzer match? Like that, or sorry, Kowalski-Kutzer, Riasco-Kutzer match, because that match was a break fest that they were trading at in the second set at the number 3 spot. And I think any Daria Kutzer match is inherently 2 hours long and at least a little bit dramatic. But like, yes, they get 3 straight set victories on the top courts. Kutzer's right there at the end of the first and second sets. And if Tennessee flips that, they absolutely had the depth And I think Lapata was winning at 4. Aaliyah was winning at 4. She had the momentum over Lapata going into that third. Seemed to have found just, again, a way to make Lapata a little bit impatient. 3 was the swing match. And I'm saying, like, they lost on the back of Daria Kutzer on this day. Isn't that a proposition Tennessee, though, is fine with taking moving forward? That's why I can't say it was a blowout, because it's like, yes, they lost 3 straight matches at the top 3 spots. Yes, 1 and 2 were always going to be an issue, but Kutzer was right there with Riasco. Like, you can't tell me on a neutral surface or at Tennessee that match couldn't have been flipped.
Right. But then you also have, Kowalski, who's wins a very close set, but she does win the set at number 1. She's up a set in 4-all, right? Lapata's dead even in the third. Like, yes, the Riasco match was close, and each one of those sets felt like it was a back and forth, and then they kind of fell in the last moment right for Riasco, but you still had 5 first sets for Georgia. So they took doubles and 5 first sets. Like, I'm not sure blowout is the right word, but this was a statement win for Georgia on the heels of Tennessee doing what they did to Auburn, right? So for Georgia to turn back around and win this 4-1 was a statement win to say we are at the top tier of the SEC and you are not Tennessee.
I think that's the best way of putting it. Is there's clearly a tier of separation between these two teams. I guess my argument would be it's 1 tier, not 2. And we probably knew that. But I think it's pretty confirmed that, okay, Tennessee might not be in that top 8 hunt that the way Georgia is, but Tennessee is top 16 good with the depth that they present and with how well they competed, again, at most of these spots. And Ma and Vidmanova, who are 2 of the top 10 players in the country, that's a particularly difficult matchup for this Tennessee team to overcome. But you're right. Like, you have to give credit to Georgia, who, again, outside of one really weird match in Columbus where everyone goes to die, like that Ty Tucker Tennis Center, you're just not winning there. They are as good as advertised this year. Like, they have been very good. Lapata getting more matches under her belt. Jay, shout out to this Georgia team who, again, after a really weird 2022, they're back where they've been for the past decade.
Yeah, and the thing that also makes this victory impressive is they have not been good in doubles all season. I mean, they've been basically giving away doubles points in the SEC. So to get this doubles point is a good way to kind of turn that momentum around. But the concern is that Anya Hurdle has not been in the lineup. And I think that's, an open question for this Georgia team moving forward, because that adds to that depth. You see that Tennessee, strong depth of them, kind of takes Gigi 0-3 there at the number 6 spot. They need Hurdle back in the lineup if they want to be a tier 1 title contender.
You're right. I do like Gigi and Narendorn getting as many matches as they've gotten this season, though. That's inevitably a good thing come May, when either it's a matchup thing or someone does get a little dinged up and you have to play there. But, again, Georgia begins to separate itself. I think Florida also, after the tough loss against Kentucky, what a week they had, obviously, to get some wins in SEC play, but perhaps most importantly, the 4-1 win on Wednesday over Michigan. They didn't just win that match, Jay. They gave they gave the Wolverines the business. And, they take doubles, dropping just 4 games in the 2 sets they win. And then, straight set wins from Dahlstrom at 1, from Dudney at 3, from D'Oliveira at 5. They won 4 first sets. The business was given. And it's so interesting because last week we had that conversation about who are the tier 2 teams, right? If North Carolina's in a tier by itself, or if they're tier 1A, who's tier 1B? And we were kind of wavering on Michigan. I mean, it's a tough outdoor loss, no doubt, for the Wolverines to lose 3 straight set matches, particularly in flight in Kari Miller, in Julia Fliegner, Gala Masachirito, who have been some of the staples for this Michigan team so far this season. But what it also tells me is that this young Florida team, they're getting better. And again, Dudney's a sophomore. I believe Galis and D'Oliveira, freshmen or sophomores as well. They have. I'm keeping an eye on Florida. They grind. Like, it's a classic Florida team. They make you work, and Michigan wasn't ready for that battle.
Yeah, and it's disappointing too. We saw this with Ohio State. This is not either of their first outdoor matches when they go on the road. This is Michigan's second outdoor match heading down to Florida, and just looked overmatched, right? Overmatched and overwhelmed, right? And I'd say like two classic words I would use to describe this Michigan team when it comes to May, right? And they're playing outdoor tennis, and just a disappointing showing by then. And Rachel Galis was match points, right, in the second set, likely going to be 5-1, maybe 5-2 or 6-1. So this was not a close match at all. It was impressive showing by Florida, who clearly angered by that Kentucky loss without Sarah Dahlstrom at the top of that lineup, coming in facing at the time a top 3 Michigan team. I just feel like we're entering into the same song and dance territory with both Michigan and Ohio State, where it's like, they're going to go back indoors, they're going to play each other, they're going to end up top 8, and then we'll see what happens outdoors in May.
See, I don't know if I'm quite there yet because Michigan looks fine on its West Coast swing. And I will just say California and Florida Heat are different. They really are, Jay, and you have to get accustomed to it.
Sorry, where's NCAA's this year?
Here's the difference. If you're a top 8 seed, where are you playing your first 3 matches? And so if your argument is that they're not going to win the NCAA tournament, fine. That's a different argument than saying, and I think half the battle is getting to the final site, right? You got to get to that final 8 first and foremost. That is, I don't want to say a win within itself, but let's be clear. I think this Michigan team's made the quarters once, twice under head coach Ronnie Bernstein, and that is the short-term goal, is getting to Orlando. And I think it's 2 different conversations, if that's fair.
That is fair.
Wow. I wasn't ready for that response.
No, I mean, you're right. It's a big deal for Michigan to make the quarterfinals. So getting there would be a massive milestone.
Yeah. And that's where, again, if you're saying this loss, maybe they're out of that tier 1B, fine. But you can still get to Orlando and not be tier 1B. And I do think, again, that's the short-term goal.
See, that's where I don't think you can. I think there
if you're a top 8 seed?
I think there are a lot of teams that are not even going to be a top 8 seed that are probably tier 1B when it comes to May. Like, where's Stanford going to be ranked, right? Where's Texas going to be ranked?
But what if that Stanford match gets moved indoors on a rainy day in Ann Arbor? That's why they have to have that element, is because they can still be top 8. And you just again,
because you have to pray for rain.
You don't have to pray. First of all, in May in Ann Arbor, you don't have to pray. It'll be there. Like you're gonna get an hour of rain. It's just different. Like it's not the same. And you're right. Like right now they're at an outdoor deficit. That was tough. Was it a night match? I feel like it was a night match. And I just want to say, my thoughts on night matches, Jay. Unless Michiganders don't play under the lights very frequently, and it is something you have to practice to get used to, and otherwise you're just not going to be prepared for it. But again, Florida's up to number 16 right now in the live rankings. And I want to talk a little bit later when we get to the rankings about where things stand, because I actually think after last week when we looked at that top 16, we were like, that makes no sense. I do think some things have settled down over the course of the past week. Nevertheless, let's move on from Florida and kind of rapid fire through some other SEC teams. We talk a lot about A&M. They had the Auburn test this weekend, and I do think it's pretty clear Auburn is in that top 16 discussion, not top 8 at this point, although they somehow survived against LSU, and we'll get to that in a second. But A&M 5-2 victory over Auburn at Auburn. A&M goes and wins the doubles point. Ewing and Goldsmith transitioning slowly but surely to that number 1 spot. Good win from Kupras and Stoyana at number 2 as well. And then, look, I like that they did it a little bit differently. It was Smetnikov. It was Kupras. It was Morales with the straight set wins at 3, 5, and 6. Jeanette Morales has been pretty darn good at that number 6 spot, Jay. And again, maybe A&M goes from 1A to 1B following the loss of Carson Brandstein. But with Morales at 6, I think they can sink no lower than 1B.
Yeah, I agree. Right. I mean, she played 6 last year and she was, very formidable there at 6. So, the challenges is certainly going to be Salma Ewing moving up to 2. It's been a tough transition for her, and she wasn't thriving at 3 either. But this was the match I actually thought was way closer than the scoreline. I think Auburn really needed dubs, right? Auburn had taken dubs against Tennessee and Georgia and thought they could bank dubs against Texas A&M, who without Carson Brandstein has had to adjust, but weren't able to do it, only able to get, the 2 singles wins, which were both great wins, right, for Arsenal at 2, and then DJ Bennett at 4, who's kind of rounding into form as one of the freshmen on this team. But yeah, I mean, Texas A&M, clearly a tier 1B team, and, starting to operate now, knowing that Brandstein's not going to be there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Auburn's the most entertaining team in the country. Every match they play has some sort of twist and turn, and they're on the brink of defeat at home against LSU. They drop the doubles point. Redshirt freshman Anastasia Komar straight set win at the number 1
Yeah,
spot.
she's
Carrington
been
got a
excellent. We don't talk enough about her, but she's been excellent.
we're gonna get to LSU in a second here. Today we're making the time, Jay, and again, you look for this LSU team. I think they took 4 first sets plus doubles overall, but credit to Auburn. They lost 3 first sets at 1, 2, and 6, and it was the veterans Arsenault Flack coming back, earning 3-set victories to help Auburn take the 4-3 win. They escape. Meanwhile, the next day or 2 days later, LSU goes to Alabama, and it's Alabama who earns a 4-2 win over this LSU team. Here's my point, Jay. LSU's 9-6. Anastasia Komar has slowly elevated herself to the number 1 spot, which makes sense, by the way, because you look at what Komar's been able to do here this season. It has been ridiculous. She's now, I believe it's 14-0 overall, 10-0 at the 2 spot, 4-0 at the number 1. No, 14-1. Where'd
No,
she drop?
oh, it might be. I don't know.
Oh,
I was just in
it's 14-0
disbelief. I
overall.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're waving. You were shaking your head at me, making
yeah,
me think I'm wrong. No, she's 14-0
yeah.
this year, so she's elevated to the number 1 spot. Kylie Collins is under 500, but at 2, she gets the win over Bama, and you feel like she is going to have a little bit more success, certainly, given what we saw from her at that spot last season. I like the freshmen they've brought in as well in Nikita Viswazi. They've got players in Carrington, in, Geisler, and Rabinowitz who have experience, and yet, this Auburn team's 9-6 overall. They're 2-5 in conference play. They've lost a bunch of heartbreaking matches. Alabama match, South Carolina match. I think they're at like 46 right now in the NCAA rankings, or LSU right now is currently sitting, at number 43. They're like right on the edge.
Mm.
They're going to be a 3 seed or a 4 seed that goes to a region. They're going to beat someone, Jay. Like, I still think I'm in. My thoughts. Like, I think Coach Fogelman, it's year 1. You're going to lose the tight matches always in year 1. That's just the way how things roll. But this team is good. Like, they're getting calloused up. I think they've got pieces.
Yeah, I do not feel the same way. Komar has been excellent. I mean, she's lost. I'm looking at the stats.
That's a piece.
Yeah, that is a huge piece. She's lost 2 sets this entire dual season. She's been unbelievable. It's the right move to move her up to 1. That's going to be bigger tests for her, right? They're under 500 at 5-6, right? They don't have the pieces when it comes to the depth. I think that is going to be a big struggle. On paper, it helped to have Kylie Collins, arguably one of the better doubles players in the country. But as we saw last season at Texas, like the top of the lineup, she's not having success there. So, I mean, can they win around in NCAAs? Like, sure. Is that a good step forward for this LSU program who didn't make NCAAs last season? Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, it's year 1 for Coach Fogelman. Here's what I'm saying. They're a talented team. Like, they're just, they're fun to watch because you never know exactly what you're going to get from Collins. Komar's just blitzing everyone early on the rise down the line. You're right. She's been the best player we have not spent enough time talking about. Carrington's got some weapons. Rabinowitz is down there grinding. I like Vishwazi and how she projects moving forward as well. It's just fun. They're fun to watch. And again, they've lost a lot of close ones, and again, couldn't buy a win here this weekend, but keep your eye on this LSU team. Also, a story we haven't spent enough time talking about. How about Kentucky, Jay? Kentucky's pretty darn good. 12-7 overall, now 4-4 in conference play. They get a really impressive win over Arkansas. They also beat Missouri here this past weekend. Now, like, again, when I look at the pieces on this Kentucky roster, a lot of grinders. Like, they're just in for the fight, whether it be, a Molina, whether it be an Arushia, whether it be, a Lydia Gonzalez or sophomore Ellie Edis, who I think have both really stepped up in their second year. This team's in the tournament hunt. And after going winless in conference play last season, Jay, that's a really nice story here. The resurgence, the bounce back season for Kentucky, who as of right now, Jay, they're sitting at number 40. I don't know. I'll find them in the rankings in a second, but they're in the hunt. They're 51.
Yeah, they're in that hey, we still have a chance here towards the end of the season. I think what's been impressive about the Kentucky team is obviously they go winless in the SEC last year, but they're competing, at the bottom half of the lineup with these teams. We talk about Tennessee's depth in particular, right? When this Kentucky team played Tennessee, look, they played them really close at 5-6. Zoe Hammond, lost a tight two-setter there, and then they had split sets at 6. And so that is a big coup to have in the SEC to be able to compete at all of these positions, almost similar to Tennessee, where maybe not the marquee names at 1 and 2, but they're hanging in there, right? And even, Arusha taking out Mertena last time they played Tennessee, like they have points on the board that they can get in the SEC.
They traded a loss at Ole Miss, which they should have had, for the win at Florida, which was the shocker. They'll take that trade.
Yes.
Had to beat Missouri. They do. Big win at Arkansas. I'll tell you what, they've got Auburn, Alabama at home this weekend. They are primed to beat Auburn at home. Like, that is upset alert central. There are going to be 3-set matches. That match is going to be 3 hours, and we will have it for you on our Crack Rackets Cross Court Cast this Friday on our ESPN SEC Network Plus broadcast. Why can't they win at Vanderbilt with everything going on with Vandy? And, again,
by the transitive property, right? They beat Arkansas. Arkansas beats Vandy. Kentucky should beat Vandy.
Exactly. Arkansas, the 5-2 win over Vanderbilt. Here's what I'll say. Last regular season matchup for Kentucky. LSU at home. Tell me that one's not for all the marbles, Jay, to get into that NCAA tournament. I know we have the conference tournament right after that, but I circle that as that's a bubble match. That's like you win that one, you're feeling like, okay, we probably get in.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a little more glass half empty, but the loser of that match does not get in.
Okay. No, that's what I'm saying is the winner gets in. It's an elimination match.
Well, that I still think is a question mark.
All right. I like it. Well, it's one you circle no matter what. And, again, we talked about Arkansas at Vanderbilt. We did a whole Vanderbilt segment last week, so I don't want to do that again this week. But, they can't buy a win. They just can't. It's crazy to see. And, again, the SEC always delivering us drama. But let's move on now over to the ACC. I mentioned it in our introduction. One of the most interesting swings in all of college tennis is anytime a team goes down to Florida and has to play those at Florida State, at Miami weekends. You got to adjust to the South Florida weather. It's not always the most enjoyable flight from Tallahassee to Miami and vice versa. It's adverse conditions. And this weekend, it was Virginia, who was one of the, top 10 team coming into the weekend. They take that South Florida swing first. They head down to Miami. Miami, who got a win over NC State recently after losing to Syracuse earlier in conference play. But clearly, it's the Miami team that beat NC State. That's the real Miami team moving forward. As Miami doesn't just beat Virginia, they get them 6-1, Jay. And, again, when I look at this Miami team, they're winning doubles points now. They get wins from Fenning and Noel at 2, Achung and Tahan at 1. Of course, let's be clear, Miami produced the NCAA doubles finalist last season, so we know Coach Twos can coach them up in terms of how their system works. But 1-3 win from Noel at 1, 2-1 win from Achung at 2, 2-1 win from Fenning at 3, and call me crazy, I really like their bottom 3 of Bach, Collins, Mack, and Tahan at 4, 5, 6 as well. This Miami team is freaking good. They're trying to position themselves for 1B tier consideration, Jay.
Yeah, so I'm a little embarrassed because I previewed this match on my show, and I thought this was going to be super close. Just looking at on paper, it was like strength versus weakness, weakness versus strength. You were just not sure where knew where some of the wins would come from. You knew Alexa Noel was going to get a win at 1, but ultimately not sure how it would pan out. Both of these teams have been solid in doubles. Miami has been solid, like you mentioned. And this was not close at all. I mean, losing 10 games in the top 3 positions. I mean, this was a blowout from Miami. And what was interesting about this match is coming into it, Virginia, top 10 team, is in the driver's seat for that number 2 seed in the ACC because they went 1-1 against North Carolina and Duke. They've banked that win. If they win out, they win. And it helps that Miami, who's already beaten NC State, took a loss to Syracuse. So
Mhm.
Virginia, prime position to, if they get this win over Miami, they're basically locked in as a 2 seed. And things really fell apart for them in the Miami Heat. So it was a great win for Miami. I'd like to see them do it outside of Miami, right? We saw them go on the road at Texas A&M. I was a little underwhelmed. But overall, a great win for them. It was nice to finally see Natasha Subash at number 1 for Virginia. Finally see that debut. But overall, just a great win for Miami.
Is Iowa State's best win this season their win over Miami at Miami during the kickoff weekend?
Well, or Texas at indoors. Those are their
Yeah.
two best wins.
I mean, maybe it's at Miami with the
Well,
slopes Miami's taken. That's what I'm saying. It's
and
just,
at Miami, true. I
yeah,
think, yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
Outdoors. And so, like, again, that's actually Iowa State's, like, I mean, that's their best win. Like, that's why it's them versus Texas at this point for that top 8 seed consideration. Um, yeah, Miami's just freaking good. Like, Fenning and Achung are unreal, and they're 2-3. Like,
Yeah.
in 3-2, excuse me. And like Alexa Noel's back to her form. She beat Schneider a couple weeks ago to 1-3 Subash. Like, it's a really good win over again the number 1 player for Virginia. They destroyed Virginia Tech the next day as well. When Miami beats you, they just destroy you. Like, it's really impressive to see this run they've been on. Now, again, I want to see their matchup because they haven't played North Carolina yet, right?
No.
And so I need to
Or
see
Duke.
that.
Yeah, they
Yeah, I
haven't.
want to see them Duke. And by
That's
the way,
coming
those are
up.
coming up this weekend, and we'll
Yep.
talk about them in a second. And those matches are on the road for Miami, might even end up indoors. It's a really good win, though, for the Hurricanes. And again, they inch closer and closer to that top 8 position. And you feel like if you're the ACC, obviously North Carolina is going to be a top 8 seed. Can you get 2 more or 3 more? That's the question. There's certainly going to be at least 2 top 8 ACC teams. Will there be 3? I would venture yes. There might be 4 if they keep beating one another up. But you bank on 3, and you're right. Virginia was in that driver's seat. They had, they had the opportunity to control their own destiny. Now they fall a bit behind. Miami elevates itself. It's right there now with a Duke team with 1 loss. Obviously, Virginia now has 1 loss. NC State has the 1 loss. Miami has the 1 loss. Probably 2 of those teams end up as top 8 seeds. And that's why Virginia not losing to Florida State the next day was so important. Virginia bouncing back 4-3 victory. Win doubles fairly straightforward. Virginia also getting straight set victories from Subash at the number 1 spot. They get a straight set victory from Ziodato at 5. Sophomore Elaine Travinsky was the one who held on. 6-2 third set win over Lancelot. Lancelot, the lefty, serving and volleying down the home stretch of that second set. It was a delightful match to be on the broadcast for. Where are you with this Virginia team? Do they have a shot? Are they top 8 good in your mind? They obviously still have a shot at top 8, but are they top 8 good to you? Because certainly it's all names we know.
Yeah, but the name we don't know, we haven't seen,
Yeah.
Annabelle Shu, right? I think that's the big question mark. When does she come back, if she comes back, and is she at the form that she was at indoors, where she was going to be in a 750 type player, winning 750% of her matches at like 4, pushing a Ziodato down even further. That's, I think, Annabelle Shu in the line that puts them at like a number 8 caliber. Without her, I think they're going to be on the outside looking in.
Could very well. Virginia, Michigan, round of 16. You could see that rematch happening. Match we saw obviously at the National Indoors. That could be a very fun one. No, I mean, again, they needed to bounce back. They do. Virginia 1-1 on their Florida swing. There were a bunch of other fun ACC matches throughout the course of the weekend. Clemson, Georgia Tech, both 4-3 winners over UCF. You had NC State 4-2 over Notre Dame. Notre Dame, though, smoked Wake Forest in South Bend. I think they won 6 straight set matches. They won 2 bagels in doubles, 0-0 at the 2 and 3 spots. I mean, like, Notre Dame looked really good this weekend. They looked like the team we saw beat USC in the kickoff. But speaking of USC, let's now head out west, because I don't want to break my under an hour promise to you, John J. Parsons, and to all of our listeners moving forward. Although, again, everything matters a little bit more. So there are more results for us to break down. Let's talk now about a fun weekend out west, because I do think it was a really fun, again, we had the Stanford, Cal, USC, UCLA foursome this weekend, and I think we had some notable results. Let's start with Stanford. 5-2 win over UCLA, but perhaps more importantly, they escape with another 4-3 victory over USC. And I mean, look, this USC team, they have lost some heartbreakers here this year. This time it's Yepafanova coming back from a set down. She earns a 3-6, 7-6, 6-3 win to clinch the match at the number 3 spot over Erin Cayetano. Now, the big news, you of course tweeted out Angelica Blake playing at the number 1 spot for the first time in her career. Connie Ma moved to 2, Yepafanova at 3. You had a really fun match between a couple of talented freshmen. Emma Charney, the 3-set win over Alexis Blakina. It was really good tennis across the board, Jay. Again, indicative of the level USC is capable of playing at when healthy, when they have Naomi Chung, as they did today, available to them. But Stanford needs to win out if they want to be in the top 8 conversation. They get 2 good road wins over 2 improving teams, better than their ranking in UCLA and USC.
Yeah, heartbreaker for USC. I mean, there was a moment there when, Maddie Sieg at number 1 was starting to pull away in the 3rd set against Angelica Blake, and almost simultaneously, Erin Cayetano and Emma Charney both had match points in their 2nd set. Emma Charney had like 6 of them. And, Emma Charney loses her 2nd set. Erin Cayetano
The
dumps
same
a
Emma
forehand
Charney, by the way, just a reminder, who had Bunyawi Timchaiwat on the brink as
at
well
match
against
point in
Pepperdine.
2nd set.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Erin Cayetano dumps a forehand or misses it. At her match point at deuce sends it to a tiebreak. Yepafanova wins. I mean, they were 2 points away from winning this match. Emma Charney obviously ends up winning that match in the 3rd set, so it's a good victory for her, but Yepafanova pulls away. Brutal for USC. It would have been a great win for them on the road. But yeah, I mean, Stanford looking decently strong. They need to figure out doubles. It's kind of always a weak spot for them. But, they got wins at different places throughout the lineup. It was very interesting to see Angelica Blake at number 1. We'll see how long that lasts since she went 0-2 this weekend. But you feel like both USC and UCLA are improving and they're getting better. And I would throw Cal into the mix.
That's where I want to go next, because Cal splits the weekend.
Yeah.
5-2 win over UCLA, which God they needed. 4-3 loss to USC, which oh my God did USC need as a bounce back. And again, this Cal team might be your most fascinating team of 2023. Cal right now, and we've talked about this in the past, 5-6, played 11 matches. April starts this weekend, Jay.
Yeah.
Played 11 matches, 5-6 overall. I have no idea how good this Cal team can be, and we know some of the pieces, obviously, Giovara, El Sola, Wiersholm, Villermoeller, what they're all capable of doing when healthy. I mean, again, they needed that win over UCLA so badly. They get it. I don't know. Looking at their schedule, huge weekend for them coming up, obviously, as they're going to take on the Arizona squads, both those teams in the tournament conversation. So, again, if Cal wants to get themselves back into tournament play, they got to get both of those victories. They still have Pepperdine on the schedule. Then they end with Washington and Stanford, which could both be losses, even though those matches are at home. Like, those are not going to be easy. They're going to flirt with the 500 rule. It's a really good team. Like, again, Cal, USC, UCLA, they're going to be 3-seeded floaters in NCAA regions who in that portion of the year, outdoors, I'm going to want no part of any of those teams.
Yeah. Cal's clearly getting better. I think Katja Wiersholm is getting a lot healthier. You saw Valentina Ivanov make her, I think, dual season debut after being out for injury. So, and they were, the Karma Gods, if they took it from USC against in that Stanford match, they gave it against, Cal. Cal was in the absolute driver's seat there in prime position to win that. And USC came back in so many 3rd sets, ultimately getting the clinch from Naomi Chung. So, look, this is going to be a really interesting Pac-12 home stretch, right? Seeing how these teams end up. And the wild cards are Arizona State and Washington, the 2 teams that have like some points that these California teams can feast off of. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend. Again, all these teams needed wins, except for maybe UCLA after they got their win over Ohio State, because UCLA is not going to be a top 16 team, but they're pretty firmly ensconced in that NCAA conversation now, although they need matches under their belt. And,
Yeah.
again, two tough losses, but certainly, again, for Cal and USC, I think there's more of a desperation to the weekend. And so for USC to bounce back, get the win over Cal, for Cal to get their win over UCLA, all those teams are sneaky solid. Again, all USC we thought was going to be a top 10 sort of team
Yeah.
to start the season. Slowly but surely, they're starting to look like it more and more. I would say, though, again, it wasn't just the Pac-12 action that got intriguing out west this weekend. How about the Oklahoma weekend? And it's time for us to have the Oklahoma talk. Oklahoma dropping a 4-2 match that was really fun against Pepperdine. And, it was a match that saw Lane Sleeth get a much needed victory over Janice Chen. It saw Emma Staker back to her 3-set ways at the number 5 spot. It even saw Carmen Corley and Sasha Pisareva play really fun matches at numbers 2 and 4, but they dropped that match 4-2. And, that's obviously they drop the doubles in that match. They come back, they take the doubles against San Diego. They drop 3 straight set matches against San Diego, ultimately drop that match 4-1 overall. Oklahoma's not going to be a top 16 seed. And I mean, again, everything. This is almost the Texas 2021-2022 scenario, right? Where
The
everything breaks
men, we
right.
should say
Yeah,
the men.
yeah, thank you, the men. Thank you. Where everything breaks right for you. You win all these 4-3 matches, you get to the semifinals. The next year, for some reason, the breaks go the other way. And again, they were right there with Pepperdine. Czar and Corley 7-5 in the third. Tim Chaiwan and Pisareva are into a third set. They're just, the problem is the next day again, San Diego gives them the business. It's just, again, Staker's not as automatic as she was last year. And, Corley and Pisareva, they won about 70% of their matches last season. They're at about 50 to 60% this year. Sleeth, same deal, was a really slow start. Although you do wonder, getting back outdoors, how that will help her. I don't know. Where are you with this Oklahoma team? I mean, are they in now the USC, UCLA, sleeper category where they're not going to be hosting, Jay, and short of running the table and winning the Big 12 tournament, they will not be a top 16 team.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Oklahoma, you have to take the wins from that Pepperdine match. And I thought watching that match, I was like, this Oklahoma team is starting to get it back, right? They really needed doubles. But I mean, great win for Sleeth at 1, great win for Julia Garcia at 6. And then they were fighting. And it was the first time I'd really seen them fight super hard in that Pepperdine match. And they were keeping all of those matches close. After that, I was like, okay, they're going to roll over San Diego and they're going to come away 1-1 feeling good. To show up at that San Diego match and do what they did, you just have to erase that from your memory. I'm sure it was a heartbreaking loss against Pepperdine, but that's the team that you need to say, this is the team we're bringing in back to the Big 12 season, because the team that showed up at San Diego is just not a team that is going to make it deep in the postseason.
Yeah, they lost 5 first sets. And again, after winning doubles, you can't have that. And
right.
That's been a theme too consistently for this Oklahoma team this year.
Well, it's too inconsistent, right? You start to see flashes of it. You see the flashes against Pepperdine, and you go, okay, here we go. And then you show up against a San Diego team who, yes, they made indoors, but has not been that good since.
Yeah.
And that was a really tough loss.
No, it hurts, especially because, again, Staker, Sleeth, I even think Garcia Ruiz losing to McBride, who's a really solid option for San Diego at 6 in the fashion she did, 3 and 6. I thought they had good weekends. Guzman, that's a terrible matchup against Savannah Brodus. It's just, again, Brodus has so much time, all the time in the world. She's right there against Goldsmith in 3 sets. It's just again, you can't have Pisareva losing 1-1. You can't lose 5 first sets after you win doubles. You just can't. That's what it comes down to. And so, yeah, Oklahoma's going to be the friskiest 24th ranked team in the country you've ever seen, because obviously it's, again, very much the same core from last season. And should they catch fire on the right day, we saw them beat Duke at the National Indoors. We know on the right day how good this team can be. They just haven't had those right days yet, which maybe the tennis god, according to the tennis gods, means that they're due. But, again, that's everything that happened out on the West Coast. Now, I want to run through a bunch of other results with you here, Jay. Let's rapid fire through them. I'm just going to throw a result at you. You give me your reaction because we had a lot of other good ones I want to mention. Washington over San Diego 4-2. Is Washington top 16 good?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. We did Arkansas Vandy already. Good bounce back 5-2 win for Michigan over Wisconsin. Yes.
It was. Yeah. I mean,
if you want anything else, feel free.
well, this is a Wisconsin team that's going to start, tumbling down the rankings.
Yeah, pretty quickly here. We mentioned Clemson, Georgia Tech, 4-3 wins over UCF, Notre Dame, 4-0 over Wake Forest. I mean, again, that was quick in South Bend. NC State, 5-2 over Notre Dame. Any thoughts on those?
I don't think NC State looks that good right now. I think there's a lot of holes in this lineup. We'll have to see when they start playing some of these top ACC schools. I'm very interested to see how that plays. I was excited to see Schneider play these matches, though.
Miller hasn't been healthy all season. You're right. I think the best player on their team has been Alana Smith, which is both a burden and a blessing because it's great to see her healthy again. Great to see someone who was a top 15 player in the country regain that form. But with the falls they had, Rincelli, Rajecki, Abrams, you just expected them to be locks in ways you're right. They haven't been this year.
Yeah, and we missed Smith in at least one match this weekend, right? So hopefully that's not anything serious.
Yeah, very well said. I'll also say I would not want to play Georgia Tech. Bilchev's so good. We haven't spent enough time talking about her. So there's your annual Bilchev mention. Duke, 6-1 over Syracuse. Syracuse also knocked off by UNC. Syracuse isn't going to be top 16 this year, Jay. I think we learned that officially. Texas Tech, 6-1 over Kansas. Not too shabby for the Red Raiders.
Yeah, not something you love to see if you're, Texas or Iowa State, wanting that Kansas team to stay kind of top 16. But yeah, I mean, that was, I think, the first win for new head coach there at Texas Tech in the Big 12. So good to see him getting his feet wet there.
Yeah, and some other ones, just NCAA implications. Illinois is going to get in. 4-1 win over Purdue. They're looking good. Iowa, 4-1 win over Nebraska. These things absolutely matter on the margins. Air Force, 4-3 win over San Diego State. Shout out to Air Force. Appreciated the shirts they sent me the other day. I'll be sure to rock them on a show coming soon. And then Fresno State, 4-0 win over Colorado State. Any other final thoughts, Jay? Are you ready for my final question at you?
I am very ready for this final question.
All right. Here's my last question, and it's not on our screen. I don't think super producer Daniel Westoff made a graphic for it, but here's my last point. North Carolina this weekend, victories over Boston College, over Syracuse. That was expected. The Tar Heels now 22-0 overall on the season. Here are the numbers. 86-12 in individual dual match play in singles. 35-8. I'll learn how to read eventually in individual double sets. My last point to you before we end today's show, because we have not talked about the Tar Heels much since the National Indoors. There hasn't been much to discuss. They're steamrolling everyone. They're everything we thought Pepperdine might be last season, Jay. And I know you and I are a bit shy after that Pepperdine prediction went so astray last season. But my last point to you is, are we talking enough about this team? Are we sure this team isn't generationally good? Are we sure this team, which beats teams 4-0 in about 87 minutes annually, isn't just going to steamroll their way through everyone? It's just like they are as good as advertised. Frawley is 13-1. Brandmeier is 13-1. Tran is 11-1. They're just like, everyone's winning. They're as good as advertised. They have Scotty on the part-time plan where she doesn't have to stress herself out each and every week in singles. And, again, the whole system was they have 7 top 30 players, so you can sit whomever you want to sit. They've employed that system to perfection. They're as good as advertised, Jay. We have a once-in-a-generation team, and I don't know if we've talked about it enough.
There's not really any words to answer this question. Are we talking about North Carolina enough? Uh, I mean, what is there to say, right? We will discuss if this is a once in a generation team if they win the NCAAs. These stats that you're listing, these records that you've shared, they all are true a year ago. They were all true 2 years ago when this team has steamrolled through the regular season in the
Not
ACC.
last year. Not last year.
Well, last year they didn't. Well, yeah, last year they were
Well, they had the
undefeated until
hiccups
they lost
against
to Duke
Duke, and then they
in the
lost in the
last match of the
conference tournament
season.
as well. Yeah, but then they had two hiccups right at the end of the year.
And where
The
are we today?
2021
Where are we
comparison is
today?
fair.
Where are we today?
Yeah, but I
March
don't think.
28th.
Yeah, but I still think this team wasn't just like I'm telling you, Jay. 87 minutes. Like they fuck people up. I don't know how else to say it. That's just they walk in, they punch you in the face, they shower, they leave.
And I'm just saying we've seen it every year. We've seen it almost every year for a very long time. And
I
now
don't know.
that's
This
not to
feels
take away
2020-ish. But go on.
That's not to say what they're doing isn't like ridiculously impressive. It is, right? And you look at some of these other teams that might have a really good year and then fall back. This North Carolina team does not do that. They are in the hunt, number one team in the country every single year. It's very impressive.
But
I
here's
don't know what
go ahead.
there else is to say, though, other than yes, they're coming off a weekend where they beat BC and Syracuse 6-1. They've probably done that every year for the past 10 years.
Yeah, well, as we move to our rankings, they've been number one from the start. They're going to stay number one, probably even if someone does knock them off. Although, if Miami beats them this weekend, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, they'll
But-
be number one regardless of what happens for the rest of the season. They're
here's the
so
thing.
far ahead from a points perspective.
Well, A&M, again, messes around. A&M doesn't mess around, but they play close matches. There are three setters that decide things. For Georgia, they've played close matches where three setters decide things. Pepperdine, they play close matches where three setters decide things. Again, North Carolina fucks you up. Like, they're gonna, even if they lose doubles, they're gonna win 4 first sets in singles. It's gonna happen pretty fast. Brantmeyer's off the court 2-2 against everyone. Like, it's just a joke how good she is at that 2 spot. Crawley, it might be 4-5, but you know she's gonna win. Like, Tangillig's gonna win. One of Yarlagadda and Tran is gonna win. It's just, it's so definitive. They are so clearly the number one. I guess that's where we start with our rankings. Not a ton of movement this week, obviously.
Let me say this about North Carolina, because I think that the nuanced take is that here is that relative to the field, this North Carolina team is better than they've ever been relative to the field. In every other year where they have racked up similar records, where they haven't gotten it done at NCAAs, there were other teams that I think were not, that were closer in level to them.
Except 2020. Because again,
the season that didn't happen. The season that didn't happen, and we didn't even get this far in 2020, right? The season was already ended on March 28th. So no, you can't do the bit, right? In the past 5 to 6 years, right? At this point in time, relative to the field, I mean, they are head and shoulders above. There's no other year where this happened.
I can't do the bit because I was there. I watched McKenna Jones at 5 and young Scotty and young Cam Mora and then Alexa and Sarah again, I was there, Jay. So yeah, I'm going to do the 2020 bit there momentarily. But no, North Carolina is still your number one team. A&M number 2 for us. Georgia 3. Pepperdine has worked its way up to the number 4 spot very quietly, very consistently. NC State 5, Michigan 6, Miami up to 7, Stanford up to 8. That's big because right now you have Duke at 9, Iowa State falling out to the number 10 spot. So for us, no top 8 Big 12 teams right now. Stanford sneaking into the top 8. Your thoughts on this, Jay?
Yeah, I think in doing rankings this week, 5 was the inflection point, right? I felt very comfortable at those top 4 teams. I had them in that order. 5 was like, I have no idea who's 5.
Yeah.
I don't recall who I had there. I think I might have just kept Michigan there, but I mean, it's like, does Stanford go there? Does Texas go there? They're looking good. 5 is that inflection point. I think all of these teams are in a similar boat right now.
this is where I get back to I looked up all these teams' best 4 wins because I was looking for separation. And it's like, again, Iowa State beat Miami, Michigan beat Pepperdine. No, Michigan lost to Pepperdine, excuse me. But Michigan beat Virginia, who beat
Yep.
Duke. Miami lost to Syracuse, which is probably the worst loss of the bunch. Stanford beat Texas, but again, doesn't also lost to Duke and doesn't have too many signature victories. They're all pretty even, and they've all beaten UCF, and I say that lovingly. Yeah, it's like pick a name out of a hat. Iowa State deserves to be in that conversation right there. I think 10's a little low for them, but I think Stanford, I would probably pick Stanford over them. So I'd probably pick Duke over them as well. And so again, like I can't knock the criterion, but Iowa State beat Miami. Like there's your win right there. And so right now, again, really thin margins. You're right. 5's that inflection point from NC State, who lost to Miami, all the way through to about Tennessee, Texas in that 12-13 range. That's where things get interesting. And for what it's worth right now, top 8 of the computer rankings: North Carolina 1, A&M 2, Pepperdine 3, Georgia 4, Michigan 5, Ohio State 6, NC State 7, and then Duke with that valuable number 8 spot. Here's what I would say, though, in our final thoughts on the rankings, Jay. Listen to this 9 through 16. Texas, Iowa State, Miami, Virginia, Auburn, Tennessee, Stanford, and Florida. Next 3 teams out: Oklahoma State, Washington, and Wisconsin. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think you could knock Wisconsin off of that list. I think we're at 18 for 16 spots. Like, I think Oklahoma State should still be in contention for a top 16 spot while they played Michigan and getting that signature victory over Texas. I think Washington, yes, the Vanderbilt win has become devalued, but they beat USC and UCLA and still have the big Pac-12 matches ahead of them. I think those 2 teams should still be in top 16 contention. I feel like 18 for 16, though, feels pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not looking at the full list beyond to see if there's any sleepers that could jump the line, but listing those off, those all sound right to me.
My sleepers are South Carolina, who I just think is damn good. Like, I've just watched a lot of them of late, and I'll ride with Ackley Hamner, and we'll find 2 more because Sarah Hamner's getting better and better with every passing match.
And Ackley's looked incredible.
Yeah, and she's been top 10 all year long. That's what I'm saying. It's the Ma Vidmanova we're not talking about. I think that's it. Like, that would be my sleeper looking down the list. Like, Oklahoma out of respect, but they're not getting there with what their record looks like. I think we're at 18 for 16. Final word goes to you.
Well, yeah, I just pulled it up now to see if I could find a sleeper. I think you're right. I mean, Georgia Tech, just because they're in the ACC, has wins, right? If they got, a win or 2 in the ACC tournament, like they could make a big jump. But, I think you're right. 18 for 16.
Yeah, so there we go. And with that in mind, let's look at the week ahead here to wrap today's show, because there are a lot of good matches ahead, Jay. And I've organized it on my list. I have 3 tier 1 trips. You tell me what you're looking forward to most. Tennessee, Georgia at A&M, and we do get that Georgia A&M, 2 undefeated teams left in the SEC women's standings. They're going to do battle. It's obviously a top 5 battle. You've got Miami making the Tobacco road trip. They're at Duke, at UNC this weekend. You've also got Iowa State on the Oklahoma road trip, at Oklahoma State. Those are my 3 tier 1 trips, 6 matches you cannot miss throughout the course of the weekend. Which one intrigues you most and why?
Ugh, this is tough. These are such good trips.
Those are the tier 1s, right? Like, those 3 are all on the same footing in your mind?
Yeah. Well, I actually think I like the at Texas A&M and at Tobacco Road ones better than I do the Big 12.
I agree, but here's why I had to put it there. It's because, like, that is NCAA implications. Like, Iowa State wins them both. We got to talk top 8 again.
Yeah. So it's more like a little bit of personal preference here.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's
Miami. Come on.
No, I want to see Georgia A&M. We didn't get it indoors.
I like it.
Yeah, Georgia A&M, because that is top 3, top 2 implications. That one, but I'm very curious about Miami and both those Duke UNC matches. I think they roll Duke, and I think the North Carolina one's going to be very interesting.
See, I think this is the weekend Duke starts to look like Duke. And Brizgalova and Shvets have been racking up matches at 5 and 6. Beck's doing her thing.
How
Mora,
about
Jackson.
Beck Noel? I'll circle that one. That's
That's
the
what
one
I'm
I'm most
saying.
interested.
It's
Individual
like,
match I'm most interested in this weekend.
come on, like sign me up immediately. You're right. Georgia A&M is probably the best individual match. Of course, the battle at 6, like, yes, they're a player down without Brandstein, but you probably lean Morales over whomever Georgia plays at 6 this weekend, assuming we don't see Hurdle. And even then, maybe you still lean A&M. Yeah, like Vidmanova at 2 over Ewing, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Stoyanov versus Ma. Hello.
Yeah.
Um, they're all really good matchups. Those are your tier 1s. My tier 2s are Georgia Tech, Clemson at UVA, Arizona State at Cal and Stanford, and just Auburn at Vanderbilt, because that could lead to like just combustion of both programs by the end of the match. Like, who knows where that match is ending?
Well, I know where it's ending, and it's ending in an Auburn win.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fair enough. Can I give you a couple upset alerts?
Okay.
LSU knock off one of Georgia or Tennessee at home this weekend.
No.
Kentucky knock off Auburn at home.
That one has 4-3 written all over it. That one is interesting.
That's my upset alert of the week. And then Bama at Vanderbilt. Does Bama go get the win?
Oof. I mean, I don't know how this is not a match I would bet on. I was saying no, but it's not good we're even speculating about that.
Yeah, there are other good ones. FSU obviously making that trip to Duke and UNC as well. Syracuse at NC State and Wake. They really need to beat Wake again to get themselves back on track. And then Michigan, their Illinois swing at Northwestern at Illinois. Bunch of other good ones on the list, Jay. Anything else you've got your eye on? Any final thoughts on the week ahead?
I mean, this is when it really, heats up. I think we maybe, we know we talked about, but the Arizona State swing for both Cal and Stanford, those are must wins for both Cal and Stanford. For Cal to get into the NCAA tournament, if Stanford wants a top 8 seed, that one, I'll be in attendance for the Stanford match as well. So I'm biased. Arkansas at South Carolina, those are 2 really feisty teams. They're facing off. So a lot of good ones.
Love to hear it. Well, with all of that in mind, folks, that's your look at the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world. And, with all that said, shout out to me. A little look behind the scenes. I was producing our live show here today, Jay. Other than our screen screw up at the start, I think I didn't mess things up. I think I did all right.
Yeah, I think you did as well. Didn't even notice Westhoff wasn't here.
Yeah, we survived. And a shout out, as always, to super producer Daniel Westhoff, who makes all of these episodes possible. A shout out as well to our dear friends at Ellesse for their continued support. To learn more about their expansive catalog, just click on the link in the description to this podcast. Jay, before we wrap the show, any final thoughts on the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world?
No?
Yeah, I like it. Well, then, with all of that in mind, a shout out, as always, to John J. Parsons, our fantastic returning champion who joins me each and every week. A shout out as well to our super producer, Daniel Westhoff, to our dear friends at Ellesse for all of the aforementioned characters. I'm your host, Alex Gruskin, and I should, of course, here's where I've messed it up, Jay, because for all of us here at both Crack Rackets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I am your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, here's how we wrap properly. What do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all tomorrow night. Thanks, everyone.